Have you ever been in a situation in your life where you had to give a presentation and the moment you walked on the stage, you completely forgot what you had to say? Well, if the answer is yes to that question, then today's video is for you. So watch till the end of this video because we'll be talking about why do we fear giving presentations, and I'll be sharing helpful tips that you can implement to overcome this fear. So sit back, tighten your seatbelts, grab your notepad, and let's dive right into the video. Fear of giving presentations is definitely a real thing. In fact, they even have a word for it. It's called glossophobia. So the next time somebody tells you that you're just making up a reason for not giving a presentation, you can definitely ask them to go take a walk. You'd be surprised to know that more than 75% of the people in the world have some form of public speaking anxiety. So until we figure out what our fears are, until we recognize that we fear public speaking, until we figure out what these fears are, we will not be any closer to fixing our fears, to overcoming these fears, to giving presentations. So let me share with you some of the common fears that people have. One of the most common type of fear that people often have is the fear of failure. This could be a tech failure or a failure to give the presentation the way you had prepared. In other words, missing out pieces of information, or it could even be a failure to make mistakes. But guess what? If your audience has never heard you give that presentation before, there is no way in the world that they can find out that you have made a mistake. Unless if you start giving long pauses in the middle of your presentation, or if you start using filler words, these are great signs for people to know that there is something wrong. Another kind of fear that people often have is the fear of being mocked at. And this kind of ties in with the fear of making mistakes. Nobody wants to make mistakes, and you most certainly do not want to be mocked at. But again, as I said before, if you do not give any signs that you have made a mistake, there is no way in the world anybody can know that there is something wrong with the presentation, let alone mocking at you. Another thing that we've seen amongst people is the moment they step foot on stage, they see this huge number of people sitting right in front of them, and they start feeling tension and that weight of their expectations. And you don't want to make any mistake. You don't want to disappoint them. So you start worrying so much that you completely forget the presentation. And suddenly you realize that you're in the middle of this brain freeze and you have no idea what to say next. And that's completely normal. It's completely okay to feel this way. And the tips that I'll be sharing later in this video will definitely help you overcome this. Another reason why we fear giving presentations is perhaps when we've had some sort of a bad past experience. You're on stage, you're thinking about how you will be delivering your next presentation, and something triggers these old memories and you suddenly have these overwhelming emotions and you have no idea what to do. So you start thinking, perhaps I'm better off not giving a presentation rather than experiencing this once again. There are a number of different reasons why people fear public speaking or even giving a presentation. But what's more important is the fact that you've recognized that you have this fear and are willing to do whatever it takes to overcome this fear and become a better presenter. So now I'm going to be sharing with you some tips. These are tips that are simple and easy to follow. And these are things that have been inspired from my own personal experiences. Now, I'm by no means an expert in public speaking, but these are things that have worked for me. So I hope that you find it useful and it helps you as well. So tip number one is to develop confidence. Now, a lot of people might tell you that you need to sound more confident when you're giving a presentation, or you need to come across as more confident when you're talking on a stage. And I always initially wondered, how can somebody be confident? How can you come across as confident? Where either you are confident or you're not, right? Until I came across this one little amazing hack that completely changed the way I delivered my presentations. And that is voice modulation. So what do I mean by voice modulation? Voice modulation basically means controlling the way you talk, emphasizing on certain important words, identifying those important words, speaking in a tone in which it doesn't come out as monotonous. So just by changing the tone of your voice doesn't mean that you will suddenly become confident. but just that you come across as someone who's not necessarily lacking confidence. I hope that makes sense. So one simple way you can change the voice modulation is just by speaking a little higher up in the pitch of your tone. Now, the easiest thing is to observe the way you speak when you're speaking to your friends. The times when you're happy, the times when you're absolutely joyous, and the way you're talking, that pitch is the kind of pitch that you need to maintain when you're giving a presentation. So a simple example would be when I'm giving a presentation, rather than sounding like I'm going to be talking about a presentation that is going to be very interesting, when in reality it's not, you would rather want to sound like I'm going to be talking about a presentation that's actually going to sound interesting, when in reality it's really not. So you see the difference before and after, how things are different, just by emphasizing on certain words, giving that pause and making sure that you're speaking in a higher tone, higher pitch of your voice. You suddenly come across as a person who knows what they're talking about. I hope this helps. So tip number 2 is to pick your audience. Many a times when you set foot on stage, we see this huge number of people sitting right in front of us and staring right back at us, right? We talked about this earlier in the video. We start feeling their expectations on our shoulders. We don't want to disappoint them. We don't want to make any mistakes. So an easy way to overcome this issue is to pick your audience. And what I mean by that is to really think of the fact that you're not presenting to the people that are sitting in front of you, but rather that you're presenting to the one person that you're most comfortable with. It could be a colleague of yours, it could be a family member, it could be a friend, it could be a spouse. Just think of that person. Just imagine that you're presenting it to them. What I like to do is in fact call them, either my friend or my spouse, and ask them to sit right at the last row of the audience, and I just think of them and I just look at them and I give the presentation. But if that's not possible for you for whatever reason, what you can do is imagine that your friend is sitting in the middle of the audience, or perhaps at the last row of the audience. This way, you're not presenting to everybody who's present in the audience. You're just presenting to one person who's sitting in the audience, a person that you're very comfortable talking to, and it's just a casual conversation that you're having with that person. Another thing that you could do is just look at the wall which is right behind the audience at the last row and just give your presentation to the wall. Now you might find it funny at first, but just bear with me for a moment. What this allows you to do is it pretty much has the same effect, right? You do not get overwhelmed by the number of people who are sitting in front of you, by the people who are looking at you. You actually are looking at the wall, and a good advantage to that is the fact that people think that you're actually looking at them, but you know the truth. You're looking at the wall. This way, you can walk around the stage, you can pace up and down across the stage, and every time you're looking at the audience, you're actually looking at the wall, and everybody thinks that you're actually looking at them. I hope you find this tip very interesting. I've seen this has worked wonders for me. The next time you give a presentation, make sure that you try this trick out and let us know in the comments below if this worked for you. Okay, so tip number 3. So tip number 3 is to control the pace of your speech. Oftentimes when we are giving presentations, we tend to speak really fast. Now what that does is, if we end up making a mistake, perhaps missing out a point or a sentence, it just does not allow us enough time to recover from that mistake. Remember, mistakes are part and parcel of a presentation. You're just bound to make mistakes. When you speak fast, you just do not have the opportunity to make a comeback from a mistake that you've made. So as a result of this, you end up using filler words. Now, we've spoken about that earlier in the video. When you use filler words, you're basically giving telltale signs to your audience that there is something wrong in the presentation. Now, it's also important for us to understand, why is it that we speak fast? One of the most common reasons for us to speak fast is because we are nervous. If we are nervous, I would definitely recommend that we take a moment before we go on stage, take a few deep breaths, we relax ourselves, calm ourselves down, count from 1 to 10, whatever it takes for us to calm down, do that. If it means that you need to meditate for a few seconds, or if it means that you need to take a few deep breaths, do that. Once you're calm, just think of the start of your presentation, and if you're prepared well, the rest of the information will just flow to you. Moving on to tip number 4. So tip number 4 is to practice the correct way. Now it's a given that we all need to practice before a presentation. No matter how experienced you are as a presenter, you definitely need to give at least some time to practice for a presentation. If you're well experienced, then you perhaps need to just brush through your points and you're completely fine with it. On the other hand, if you're a beginner and if you're starting out, you definitely want to put in a lot of time to make sure that you've practiced it well. Now, there are a few things that I would recommend that you do while you're practicing for your presentation. So one of the things that you can do when you're practicing for your presentation is to practice in front of a mirror. Now, what this allows you to do is actually look at yourself the way your audience is actually going to look at you when you're standing on the stage. This way, you get an opportunity to fix your body language, the way you're standing, the posture, the way you're speaking, the way your facial expressions are. You get an opportunity to fix it right away. The other thing that I would recommend when you practice for a presentation is to practice it with a family member or someone you are comfortable with. What this does is that it creates this setup which is somewhat similar to what you would experience when you go on stage. The only difference is that the audience that is present in front of you, someone who's not going to judge you, is someone who's not going to mock at you. So you get that confidence. Plus, most importantly, you also get some positive feedback from them, which you can then incorporate in your presentation and make it even better. Without even realizing, you've inherently placed yourself in the audience. And when you step on stage, when you are comfortable giving the presentation, you will not have fear of these people sitting in front of you. And because you've already gone through this and you've already trained yourself to go through giving a presentation to someone else. So make sure that you implement these tips the next time that you're preparing for your presentation, especially as a beginner. As you become more experienced, you'll perhaps not need to spend so much time practicing for your presentation, and you'll see that these tips are probably not applicable to you. Our last tip for this video is when you're on stage, make sure that you smile. Let me ask you this. When you see a baby smile at you, what is the first thing that you do? You smile back, right? Do you know why that is? Because it's human instinct. When you smile at the audience, it is natural for them to smile back at you. They feel that connection, they feel that comfort with you, so they tend to smile back. Remember, people sitting in the audience are not white walkers. They're not going to gobble you. They're all human beings, just like you and me. And they all understand that mistakes happen. Errors can take place. But by smiling at them, it just breaks the ice. They just tend to become a little more forgiving. So make sure when you are on stage next and you're giving a presentation, you smile at the audience. Alright, so that's it from my end for this video. I hope these tips will help you overcome your fear of giving presentations. If you've learned something new in this video today, make sure that you give it a thumbs up. Also make sure that you subscribe to this channel if you like seeing videos like these, and then click on the bell icon so that you can be notified every time we come out with a new video. I'll see you around in the next video. Till then, happy practicing and happy presenting.